However, the gravity that the gravity pendant can provide is far from reaching its limit. Jason withdrew the spiritual power input into the gravity pendant, and his whole body suddenly felt light. Sitting cross-legged, a large amount of spiritual energy flowed through Jason's body. The broken muscles, meridians, and skin were quickly repaired. With Jason's terrifying recovery ability, all the injuries all over his body were repaired in a short time. As before. I haven't felt this extreme state for a long time. Jason, who had recovered his body, opened his eyes, stood up and stretched his body with lingering fear, and at the same time there was a hint of joy in his heart. The talisman array Jason engraved on the gravity pendant is not just a simple gravity array, but a gravity space array that incorporates a gravity array. Ordinary gravity arrays can only act on Jason's body. That is, if Jason's body weighs 130 kilograms, then 10 times the gravity is 1,300 kilograms. Even if a 100-kilogram iron block is tied to Jason's body, that 100-pound iron block is still 100 pounds. But the gravity space is different. It can form a gravity space around Jason's body. Under 10 times the gravity, a 100-pound iron block is tied to Jason's body. Jason not only has to bear the 1,300-pound weight of his body, but also has to bear the weight of 1,300 pounds. The weight of 1,000 pounds of iron. However, the benefits of gravity space are not just for exercise, but also for use in combat. If someone punches me now, and I suddenly activate 50 times the force of gravity, my arm that originally weighed 10 kilograms will suddenly increase to 500 kilograms under the influence of the gravity space. I'm afraid that person will not even say they want to hit me, but just maintain the arm. The weight will exhaust him to death. Jason could completely imagine the scene during the battle. For ordinary people, the gravity of the arm would increase 10 times in an unexpected situation, and they would not be able to launch an attack before adjusting. The amount of spiritual energy required to maintain 50 times gravity is simply too exaggerated, and under 50 times gravity, my gravity space can only spread out a distance of 1 to 2 meters at most. Jason said with a smile on his face. A trace of regret, the previous short experiment had completely consumed all the spiritual power in Jason's entire first-level meridians. Even if Jason uses all the spiritual power in the 1st to 9th level meridians to provide 50 times the gravity space, it is estimated that it can only last for a few minutes. Jason knew it very well, but as Jason's strength improved, the gravity multiplier that the gravity pendant could provide became larger, the scope of the gravity space became larger, and the time lasted longer. After putting away all the remaining potions, Jason slowly input his spiritual power and controlled the gravity provided by the gravity pendant to about 5 to 6 times. With Jason's current strength, 5 to 6 times the gravity is just right. It can bring enough pressure to the body every moment without worrying about injury. In the days that followed, Jason returned to being ordinary and boring, busy practicing and preparing elixirs every day. However, what made Jason curious was that Bisvam and Saha seemed to have disappeared in the past 2 days. On this day, Saha's laboratory in the suburbs was as peaceful as ever. Only Jason was preparing the rejuvenation potion, and there was a hissing sound of the liquid rolling in the laboratory. Jason looked at the spiritual potion in front of him, and his first-level advanced spiritual consciousness carefully sensed every step in the entire preparation process of the spiritual potion. The spirit-restoring potion is a 3rd-level high-grade spiritual potion. According to the definition of the spirit potion, it requires at least a 3rd-level advanced spiritual consciousness to freely control the preparation of the spirit-restoring potion. However, at this moment, Jason relied on the first-order advanced spiritual knowledge. Knowledge, participating in the preparation of the spirit-rejuvenating potion. In his previous life, Jason relied on changes in the physical attributes of each step in the preparation of the spirit-restoring potion to prepare the spirit-restoring potion. But now, Jason uses the changes in the physical attributes of each step to in turn verify his spiritual consciousness and an operation in which psychic powers should take part. After constant attempts, Jason slowly gave up relying on physical attributes to prepare soul-restoring potions, and finally gradually used spiritual consciousness and spiritual power to participate. Although he failed countless times, he was still defeated twice by Jason. Sen's preparation was successful, but of course the quality of the 2 spirit-rejuvenating potions he prepared was not good. The faint smell of medicine is floating in the laboratory. In the laboratory, Jason is staring at the preparation bottle in front of him. His forehead is covered with fine beads of sweat. A large amount of spiritual consciousness and spiritual power are in the preparation bottle. Taking part in the reaction of the medicine, streams of hot air surged out from the mouth of the preparation bottle. After a long time, the elixir that was tumbling violently calmed down in an instant, and a layer of lavender elixir, like amethyst mixed with some impurities, appeared in the preparation bottle. Alas, although the preparation was successful, the quality of this bottle of spirit-restoring potion is too poor, so it failed. Jason shook his head, looking at the impurities suspended in the spirit potion. He couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. If other elixir masters knew that Jason only used his first-level advanced spiritual consciousness and spiritual power to prepare a third-level high-quality soul-restoring potion, and thought that the quality of the soul-restoring potion he prepared was too poor, I'm afraid there would be no one on the mainland. Most spiritual masters would choose to chop Jason to death with an axe first, and then hit the wall in shame. Master Bispham, Master Saha, and Master Jason are in the laboratory. Just as Jason was thinking about the mistakes made in the previous preparation process, Kathleen's voice suddenly came from outside the door. Immediately, the door of the laboratory was opened, and Bispham and Saha, who had not been seen for several days, hurried in. Look, what is this? Bispham and Saha couldn't wait to place the 2 potion bottles in front of Jason, with pride on their faces. How dare you take out such low-quality awakening potion and tranquilizing liquid? Jason glanced at the 2 of them with disdain. If it were me, this level of spiritual potion would definitely be thrown away as waste. Haha, although the quality is poor, it is an authentic awakening potion and tranquilizing liquid after all. It is not a failure. After hearing Jason's words, Bispham and Saha had no trace of emotion on their faces. Mind. After mastering the preparation of the awakening potion and the tranquilizing liquid, the 2 of them have mastered the preparation of 3 4th-level high-grade elixirs respectively. Now they only need to go to the Kingdom Spiritual Pharmacist General Guild in King City of Orlando to have it appraised. Will be awarded the title of 4th-level Senior Elixir Master. For the 2 people who have been at the intermediate level Elixir Master for several years, is there anything more joyful than this? Looking at the 2 people who were triumphant, Jason shook his head helplessly. He had no ambition, no ambition. The title of Senior Elixir Master made the 2 of them so excited. Jason, the 2 of us need to go to the royal city immediately. The carriage is outside. We may not be in Talon City for a while. After Saha smiled proudly several times, he organized some things in the laboratory. Items and materials. There's no need to be in such a hurry even if the profession is appraised, right? Jason couldn't help but be startled. It's not about identifying the high-level elixir masters. Lao Gue, and I just received an edict from the kingdom, requiring all palace elixir masters to go to the royal city immediately. The edict from the kingdom? Did something happen to the king's capital? We don't know about this. Okay, I won't say any more. The kingdom's envoy is still outside, so the 2 of us will leave first. Saha packed up his things hastily and walked out with Bispham. Laboratory. Jason watched Bispham and Saha get into the carriage. With the wave of the groom's whip, the carriage drove towards the east gate of Talon City. Bispham and Saha waved their hands and disappeared. In Jason's sight. Jason shook his head, returned to the laboratory, and continued to prepare the rejuvenation potion. In the next few days, in addition to practicing, Jason prepared the spirit-restoring potion. As he continued to practice, the spiritual power of the high-level spiritual disciples in Jason's body became stronger and stronger, and a large amount of high-level spiritual disciples' spiritual power filled his body. Every inch of the meridians in Jason's body is still far away from the concentration of spiritual power that can be promoted to a spiritual warrior. After spending 10 days of hard work, Jason finally consumed all the materials sent by Yen Ji to make the soul-reviving potion. Taking the successfully prepared soul-reviving potion, Jason came to the location of Oliver's auction house. After learning the news of Jason's arrival, Yenji, Barton and Viscount Phelan enthusiastically welcomed Jason into the VIP room under the surprised eyes of an Oliver auction house manager who initially received Jason in the reception room. "Here are 20 bottles of spirit-restoring potion." Jason didn't waste any time and placed the 20 bottles of spirit-restoring potion on the table. There were about 100 materials sent by Yenji to prepare the spirit-reviving potion. Jason prepared more than 40 bottles, of which 6 bottles were of the highest quality prepared by Jason through his technical flow. Jason himself, after putting them away, there were still a dozen bottles that had been prepared successfully but were of extremely poor quality, so Jason poured them all out. The remaining 20 bottles of fairly good quality were brought over by Jason. In fact, those 20 bottles of good quality were completely unqualified products for Jason, who was a 9th-level elixir master in his previous life. However, since he did not use them for himself, Jason took them out. Who would let his own spiritual consciousness is the first level of advanced level. Seeing the 20 bottles of spirit-reviving potions placed on the table in front of me, the lavender spirit-reviving potions exuded a magnificent halo, shining dazzlingly in the VIP room, looking extremely gorgeous and noble, giving the room adds an air of mystery. Even though Yen Ji was well informed, when she saw the soul-restoring potions that were extremely rare and cherished in the entire kingdom in front of her, she couldn't help but have a dull look in her eyes. Barton also stood aside with eyes full of brilliance, and Viscount Phelan was even more. I was immediately stunned. "Master Jason, this spirit card contains 1 million spirit coins as a deposit for these 20 bottles of spirit restoration potions. The remaining spirit coins will be given by our Oliver Chamber of Commerce after the auction in the Royal City ends in 2 months. You send it." Yen Ji was the first to come to her senses and hurriedly took out a spirit card from her body. Even though Yenji is one of the 3 major families in the Kingdom of Orlando and a direct descendant of the Oliver family, after seeing Jason's true achievements in the elixir, she no longer had the indifference she had in the past, and her expression vaguely revealed, "It's the slightest bit of respect." Barton and Phelan also came to their senses under Yenji's words. They stood behind Yenji and smiled silently. However, the eyes looking at Jason also contained unabashed respect, even for Barton, a senior sect spiritual master. A powerful person of this level is exactly the same at this moment. This is the status of the elixir master, who is known as the first profession on the Stern Continent. When facing a real elixir master, no one dares to do anything, whether it is a strong man who dominates the other side or a child of a powerful family. The slightest slight. If Yenji had dared to tease Jason a few times when she saw her before, now after Jason filled her with dazzling soul-reviving potions, she no longer dared to have the slightest hint of teasing. Seeing everyone's expressions, Jason's face was extremely calm, without any change. In early March, although the morning and night were still windy and chilly, as spring slowly approaches, the temperature is gradually warming up. In the afternoon, the warm sunshine shines on the earth, bringing infinite vitality to all things in the world. On the fertile fields outside the city, countless dots of green are nurturing vigorous vitality, indicating that the pace of spring seems to be no longer here. Far. At the west gate of Talon City, some pedestrians lined up, paid the entrance fee, and slowly entered the city. At this moment, a rumbling sound suddenly came from a distance, and then some black spots appeared on the official road outside Talon City. They were a horse team. There was a commotion in the crowd immediately. "It's Mr. Danny from the Healers Guild. Quick, open the middle passage." After the horse team got closer and saw who was coming, the captain of the city guard at the city gate immediately shouted, The city guards belong to the lowest level of soldiers in a city. They cannot offend any nobles or powerful people in the kingdom. The two city guards immediately moved the obstruction on the middle passage of the city gate, and the crowds on both sides of the city gate involuntarily gave way to both sides. The horse team stopped running after arriving outside the city gate. Under the eyes of the city guards, a group of more than 10 people drove into Talon City. Who is that big shot walking side by side with Master Danny? Looking at the cavalry entering Talon City, the captain of the city guard couldn't help but have a doubt in his heart. There were two people leading the cavalry earlier. One was the law enforcement officer of the Talon City Spiritualist Union, the third-level senior spiritualist Lord Danny, and the other was a rather older middle-aged man, the well-informed captain of the city guard. Do not know. Haha, Brother Renaud, this is Talon City. I have to go back in time to recover, so I won't stay with you. After entering Talon City, Danny smiled at Renaud beside him. Riding at the front with Danny was Jason's father, Renaud. At this moment, old Renaud no longer looked as decadent as he did in Kodo Town. He was wearing a long gown made of fine fabrics and riding a tall horse, which looked quite majestic. This time, Danny, who was the law enforcement officer of the Spiritual Masters Union, received an order from President Isaac and went to Kodo Town to deal with the affairs of the Spiritualists Guild and Harry's gambling house. He also visited Jason's father specifically. After learning that Renaud was also going to Talon City, he immediately invited Renaud to go with him. The two talked very harmoniously along the way. Danny, as the law enforcement officer of the Spiritual Masters Guild and a third-level senior spiritualist, did not have the slightest arrogance in front of Renaud. However, as the top master of the Todd family at that time, Danny was the 6th-level spiritual master. Renaud, a spiritual master-level figure, was naturally comfortable talking to Danny without any timidity or discomfort. Renaud also laughed, "Haha, Mr. Danny, you are too polite. I have troubled you along the way. Where is it? If Brother Renaud sees Master Jason later, he must say hello to me." Danny with a smile on his face, he turned around and shouted, "Mike, you and Master Jason are acquainted, so you can take Brother Renaud to Master Jason." "Yes, Master Danny." Mike drove the cavalry from behind. The horse came out and came to Renaud's side. "Brother Renaud, I'll take my leave first." Danny bowed his hand to Renaud and led the members of the law enforcement team towards the Spirit Masters Guild, while Mike took Jason towards Saha's Manor in the eastern suburbs. Okay. In the living room of Saha Manor, the father and son team of Renaud and Jason sat opposite each other. On the table in front of them were 2 cups of steaming tea. A faint fragrance lingers throughout the living room. "Since when did you become an elixir master?" Renaud looked at Jason in front of him, with a smile on his face, but there was no hint of blame in his tone. If it weren't for the arrival of Danny and others, Renaud would not have known that his son Jason still had such a great reputation in Talon City. Even Danny, who is the law enforcement officer of the Talon City Spirit Masters Union, mentioned Jason. Everyone should address them as master, with a tone of respect. "Father, I am just a first-level low-level elixir disciple." Jason shook his head helplessly. In fact, although many people in the entire Talon City are in awe of Jason, except for a few people such as Yan Ji who are so respectful because they know Jason's attainments in spiritual medicine, most of the others, including the Spiritual Masters Union President Isaac, all of them were so respectful to Jason after the Viscount Steele incident, because of the relationship between Bisfam and Saha. "Haha, what's the matter even if he is a low-level elixir disciple?" Renaud was extremely excited. Originally, Renaud only had a glimmer of hope for Jason to return to the clan, but now after learning that Jason is still a famous elixir master, Renaud's heart added a touch of confidence. In a few days, it will be time for the clan to recruit disciples. What else do you have to deal with? If there is anything, just finish it as soon as possible in these 2 days, and then we will go to the royal capital. No, Father, I'm here. There is nothing to deal with, and you can leave at any time. Then let's leave for the royal city tomorrow morning. Renault's eyes flashed and he clenched his hands. Early the next morning, Jason and old Reno got up early. After learning the news that Jason was going to the royal city, Kathleen was filled with reluctance. Bispham and Saha had already left Talon City. Now that Jason left, only Caesar was left in Saha's matter. Lynn is alone. Master Jason, have a good journey. At the gate of the east city of Talon City, Kathleen handed the luggage in her hand to Jason, with tears shining in her eyes, with a trace of reluctance. Well, you should go back early, Kathleen, and take care of yourself. Jason took the luggage and instructed. Hey, Master Jason, why are you here? At this moment, a strong voice suddenly came from the side, and a group of people stopped beside Jason. Brother Barton, Miss Yenji. Jason looked towards the owner of the voice and saw Barton getting off a horse, walking towards Jason with a smile on his face, and a carriage behind Barton also pulled away. The curtain was closed and Yenji walked down from it. Father, let me introduce to you, this is Miss Yenji of the Oliver family, and this is Brother Barton. Jason introduced to Renault, then pointed at Renault and said to Barton and Yenji, it's my father Renault. Uncle Renault. Mr. Renault. Yenji and Barton saluted. Haha, you two are so polite. Renault also returned the favor. As a former 6th level spiritual master, he could tell from Barton's aura that Barton had extraordinary strength at a glance, and as a child of the Todd family, he also knows a lot about the Oliver family, which is one of the 3 major families in the kingdom. Master Jason, who are you? Looking at Jason, Yenji asked respectfully. Oh, my father and I have something to go to the royal city. To the royal city? A hint of joy suddenly appeared on Yenji's face. Master Jason, we are also going to the royal city, how about we go together? After hearing that Jason was also going to the royal city, Yenji hurriedly invited him. If she could go with Master Jason, there would be more opportunities to exchange feelings along the way. Pharmacists, even the Oliver family, one of the 3 major families in the kingdom, must find opportunities to make friends with him. This? Jason glanced at his father and nodded, okay. If Jason went alone, he would naturally not team up with Yenji. It was just that his father was going to the royal city with him. If he met Yenji on the way, if there is any danger or accident, it will be much more convenient if Barton and Yenji are there. Master Jason, Uncle Renault, there is an empty carriage in the back. You two can take the carriage in the back. Yenji started to help Jason again. That Yenji should be the eldest daughter of the Yeji clan leader of the Oliver family, right? Why does she seem so respectful to Jason? Renault looked at Yenji curiously, but with doubts in his heart. He could see that Barton was extremely powerful. Strong, and being able to travel with a guard like Barton, Yenji's status in the Oliver family should not be low. When she was still in the Todd family, she seemed to have heard that the current patriarch of the Oliver family, Yeji, had an eldest daughter called Yenji. Based on Renault's experience, it can be seen that the 2 of them were quite respectful in front of Jason, and even had a hint of flattery, which made Renault puzzled. Although the status of elixir masters on the continent of St is extremely high, Jason is only a low-level spiritual disciple after all, and he shouldn't let the Oliver family, one of the 3 major families in the kingdom, be so fawning, right? Until now, Renault only thought that Jason was just an ordinary low-level elixir disciple, as he said. Shaking his head in confusion, Renault got on the carriage, while Jason rode a horse, walking in front of the carriage with Barton. Although Renault could also ride a horse, Talon City, as a border city of the Kingdom of Orlando, was far away from the royal city of Colton. It's quite far, not from Koto town to Talon City, it only takes 1 day to get there. After a long journey, his spiritual power was completely exhausted, and his body was not as good as before. He could not withstand much hardship. After heading to the royal city with Yenji and the others, Jason, who originally had to calculate the distance between cities, as well as some luggage such as dry food, completely relaxed. Yenji had to hand over these things. Do. The city of Tallinn is located on the northwest border of the Kingdom of Orlando, while the royal city of Colton is located in the southeast of the Kingdom of Orlando. Therefore, the distance is extremely long and requires passing through several cities in the middle. Every time he arrives in a city, the person in charge of the city where the Oliver Chamber of Commerce is located will almost come to greet him and arrange the accommodation for Jason and others. Sometimes if the distance between the two cities is too far, it will be difficult to set up camp, cook and be on duty at night. It's not Jason's turn to take action, Yenji's guards will make good arrangements. Jason just chatted with Barton and Yenji every day, enjoyed the scenery along the way, and spent the rest of the time practicing, which was quite pleasant. The journey was not uneventful, and they even encountered two groups of thieves. Seeing that Jason and the others were few and wanted to rob, but before they could finish talking about robbery, Barton rushed up and hacked them. The group of thieves were immediately thrown into confusion. After a few corpses were laid down, they dispersed in a rush. Generally, thieves are spiritual masters who are not very strong and have an unsatisfactory life. Under the long sword of Barton, a senior sect spiritual master, there is almost no enemy that can be defeated by one move, which makes Jason even want to try it out. No chance. Days passed like this, and Jason and others were getting closer and closer to the royal city of Colton. 11 days after leaving Tallinn City, Jason and others had arrived in the middle of the Kingdom of Orlando. It was almost dusk now, and the sun was setting in the west. A small town appeared in front of Jason and others in the distance. "Master Jason, miss, I'm afraid we won't be able to reach the next city tonight. There is a small town ahead. Let's just stop there and take a rest tonight." Barton picked up the map and looked at it, then asked Jason and Yenji asked. Jason and Yenji nodded, and the team moved forward slowly. At this moment, everyone heard a faint sound of crying coming from the small town in the distance. The horse team moved very quickly, and within a short time, Jason and others arrived in front of the town. The entire town was tightly surrounded by a layer of fence. The area was not large. It was more like a small villa than a small town. However, what puzzled Jason and others was that it was not yet night. But the town was brightly lit, and from time to time there were one or two cries. There was no need for Yenji's orders. Faced with such a strange town, the more than 10 guards and the cavalry all paid attention, and their muscles tensed up. Whenever they encountered any situation, they could pull out the long swords at their waists in an instant. "Who?" Hearing the movement outside, a head poked into the gap at the gate of the town and shouted loudly. "Brother, we are businessmen passing by. It's getting late now. We want to find a place to rest. Please make it easier." A horseman walked out of the cavalry and said loudly. "This person is the captain of Yenji's escort team. His name is Vaughn, he is a third-level senior spiritual master. Except for him, the rest of the guards and the guard team are all between intermediate spiritual warriors and high-level spiritual warriors. Only the Oliver family, one of the 3 major families in the kingdom, has masters at the spiritual master level in the escort team that protects family members, and the others are all at the spiritual master level." After a moment, the door opened, and several people came forward, led by a middle-aged man. After seeing more than a dozen fully armed guards in fine steel armor protecting the carriage, the middle-aged man's eyes couldn't help but light up. "My lords, I am Ray, the captain of the guard of Giant Tower Town. It's natural to come into the town, but recently our town has been attacked by spiritual beasts, which injured many people. The only hotel in the town is already overcrowded. If a few people enter the town, they may have to camp at the town's martial arts training ground. There are already many adventurers coming to our martial arts training ground in Giant Tower Town." "Spirit beast attack?" Barton glanced at Jason and Yenji behind him, but Yenji set her sights on Jason on the body. "Master Jason, it's getting late now. If we continue on our way, we have no choice but to camp on the road. It's better to camp at the martial arts training ground in Giant Tower Town." Besides, there isn't anything powerful in the inland area of the kingdom. Spiritual beast? Yanji asked in her tone. Miss Yanji alone makes the decision. Jason was a little helpless. If something happened along the way, Yanji would discuss it with Jason. Although Jason had told Yanji that she would arrange everything, Yanji still kept coming from time to time. We'll ask Jason for his opinion, making it seem like the person in charge of the entire team has become Jason. However, Jason had to admit that what Yanji said before was not bad, and Yanji's words also contained another layer of meaning. Even if a spiritual beast really appeared, with a master like Barton here, it didn't matter what kind of spiritual beast it was. Ah. My lords, please follow me. Ray brought Jason and others into Giant Tower Town with a look of joy on his face. As a senior spiritual disciple, Ray could see that this team was extremely capable and tough, and besides the one sitting there, apart from the charming beauties on the carriage, the guards themselves couldn't even see through any of them. With these people here tonight, I think it would be much safer to come to the town. The doors of the houses in the entire Giant Tower Town were tightly closed, and almost every doorway had a torch lit. In some wide areas, there were even piles of fires burning, illuminating the entire giant tower like daylight. Some guards were patrolling the streets. After seeing Ray, they all nodded and looked at Jason and others curiously. However, these guards were not very strong, and many of them were ordinary people in the town. In order to protect Giant Tower Town had no choice but to take up arms. In fact, when these ordinary people face spiritual beasts, except for shouting a few times to attract others' attention, they have no effect at all. Giant Tower Town is not like Kodo Town. Giant Tower Town is located in the inland of the kingdom. It is just a small town like a villa. There is only a circle of fence surrounding the town. There is no organization like the Healer Guild in the town. I met a group of people. Bandits can be massacred. In Stern Continent, there is no such thing as a spiritual masters union at the level of a small town. Kodo Town is more like a small town. As a mobile center for adventurers, there are many powerful people. It is built near the forbidden land of the mainland, the Spirit Beast mountain range. In order to prevent the attacks of spirit beasts, Kodo Town has a city wall. Gaozhou is fundamentally different from Giant Tower Town. Under the leadership of Ray, everyone quickly arrived at the martial arts training ground in Giant Tower Town. The entire martial arts training ground was brightly lit, and many people were already surrounding them in twos and threes. Huh? Jason glanced at him. Those who are together should be the heroes in Giant Tower Town, and those who are scattered and seem to be unruly and unsociable should be some adventurers. Unknown adventurers usually have a defensive mentality towards each other. How can they be as united as ordinary people in a small town? After Jason and others came in, they saw Jason and his team of capable guards. The heroes in Giant Tower Town all had eyes shining with joy, while the eyes of the adventurers shone with vigilance. These adventurers came here to hunt spiritual beasts, and naturally they did not want others to steal their business. Faced with the vigilance of the adventurers, Vaughn and others didn't care at all and quickly set up a tent on the martial arts training ground. Vaughn, go buy some food. After the tent was set up, Yanji ordered. Since she came to a small town, she naturally didn't need to eat dry food as usual. Seeing Yanji, almost all the adventurers present brightened up, and then secretly whispered. Of course, as adventurers, these people have good eyesight, and they can naturally see that Jason and his group are unusual. I don't dare to cause trouble. If my life is lost, I will have no place to cry. Soon, Vaughn and several guards came back with a lot of food. Everyone started a fire to cook, and the whole martial arts training ground was filled with the smell of barbecue. Barton also took out a few bottles of good wine from the carriage, and sat around with old Renault and Jason to drink. Plus Yanji, there were 4 people in total. The dozen or so guards also sat together in groups of 4, eating together. Including Vaughn, there were 4 groups in total. No one drank, and the discipline was strict. Huh. Suddenly, Vaughn and others who were sitting there, eating their meal, stood up in vain, looking forward with gleaming eyes. A handsome middle-aged man wearing exquisite leather armor walked up not far from Jason and the others, with a smile on his face. After standing in front of Vaughn and the others, he stretched out his right hand to show that he meant no harm. Guys, don't be nervous. I'm Tan, a third-level intermediate spiritual master, and an adventurer from the nearby Blue Wa City. I think you are a passing caravan. I wonder if you need any guards? This area is still extremely dangerous. Familiar. Tan looked polite, with a face full of confidence and an extremely gentleman. While speaking, he glanced at Yan Ji under the firelight very covertly, with a trace of fanaticism flashing in his eyes. A third-level adventurer can be considered a master no matter where he is in the Kingdom of Orlando. Boss Tan, come on, haha. A burst of laughter came from a group of adventurers in the distance. Go away. Barton shouted in a low voice, took a sip of wine, and didn't even stand up. How could Barton and the others not understand Tan's evil thoughts, and Jason and the other three simply ignored them. He took off Tan and continued eating without even looking at him. Tan's face changed slightly, and then he smiled again. Several people, Vaughn and other guards, all drew out the long swords at their waists at the same time. I told you to get out, did you? Do you hear that? If you talk nonsense again, you will be killed. A chilling atmosphere spread in the martial arts training ground, and Vaughn and others looked fierce. With Barton's statement, Vaughn and other guards naturally knew what to do. Tan looked at the long swords in the hands of Vaughn and others that glowed coldly under the firelight, and felt the murderous gazes of Vaughn and others. He had no doubt that the opponent would strike down with one sword. He took a deep breath and said a cold light flashed in his eyes. He hesitated for a moment, and finally turned around and left. Returning the sword and putting it into its sheath, Vaughn waited for the guards to sit down neatly and continued to eat dinner. Their movements were in unison, as if they were one body, and he did not take Tan to heart at all. Seeing Tan's dejected return, some adventurers in the distance burst into laughter. I'm afraid that guy has a grudge against us. Old Reno said seemingly unintentionally. If that kid dares to do anything, I will kill him. Barton didn't take Tan to heart at all, raised the wine glass in his hand to old Reno, and laughed loudly. Come on, brother Reno, fuck it, haha. Ouch! At this moment, a howl of wild beasts suddenly came from not far away. The originally loose heroes of Giant Tower Town all stood up nervously, and the adventurers also pulled out their long swords one by one and looked at outside the dark Giant Tower Town. Huh? There are several spiritual beasts. Barton also raised his head. Boom boom. 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 The fence on the outside of Giant Tower Town exploded in vain, and several black shadows rushed in like lightning. The training ground of Giant Tower Town was facing in the mountains behind Giant Tower Town. Those black shadows immediately shot towards everyone on the martial arts training ground. It's Wind Wolf except for Jason and the others. The other adventurers on the martial arts ground suddenly became commotion. An adventurer who was close to the fence shouted loudly after seeing the black shadow clearly. Everyone, please be sure to kill that spiritual beast. Don't let that spiritual beast enter the town and hurt ordinary people. A big man from Giant Tower Town shouted anxiously. The adventurers just talked about it, but no one responded to Nade. The heroes of Giant Tower Town on the side had sad faces, and they hoped that someone would go up and find out. The spirit beasts that appeared in the town 2 days ago were only some first-order spirit beasts, or a single second-order spirit beast, but tonight 8 second-order wind wolves suddenly appeared. This time, the spirit beasts were of a higher level and more in number. Although Judah Town has sent people to ask for help from the nearby Blue Wa City Lord, it will take a lot of time to recruit people again, and it is impossible for the Blue Wa City Lord to send people to rescue the entire Yuchua Mountains. Since the spiritual beasts have been wiped out, some adventurer missions can only be arranged in the Spiritual Masters Guild. By the time those adventurers had almost wiped out the spiritual beasts on the outskirts of the Uchua Mountains, I'm afraid their giant tower town would no longer exist. Huh, you cowards, no one is going, and I'm going alone. Seeing that no one responded to him, Nate couldn't help but show a trace of disdain on his face, and then he climbed over the fence alone and disappeared into the dark Wutua Mountains. This kid is quite courageous. Barton smiled. Master Jason, Uncle Renaud, and Uncle Barton, I'm going to go and rest first. After finishing her meal, Yenji smiled at Jason and the others, stood up, and walked into the tent behind her. After Jason and others finished eating, they tidied up and returned to their tents. Although the spate of spiritual beasts appearing in Giant Tower Town made Jason quite curious, he was not bored enough to do that. Like I'd, he broke into the mountains and forests to find out what was going on. The night is getting deeper. The adventurers also gradually calmed down, and each found a place to rest in the martial arts training ground. The corpses of several wind wolves and the corpses of the adventurers were completely disposed of, and the seriously injured adventurers they were also sent to the town for treatment. Jason quickly fell asleep. Outside the tent, several guards were sitting around the tent, either openly or covertly, on alert. In the distance, from the mountains shrouded in darkness, 1 or 2 roars of spirit beasts could be heard from time to time. Other than that, in the silent night, there were only bursts of crackling sounds from the burning fires. Suddenly roar. A thunderous roar suddenly sounded outside the giant tower town not far away. The huge roar instantly swept over the entire giant tower town, waking up countless people in their dreams. Jason suddenly turned over and, sleeping in his clothes, he opened the curtain of the tent and walked out. There was a commotion in the entire martial arts training ground, and many adventurers woke up one after another, looking at the dark mountains in the distance with frightened faces. Impossible, how could 2 groups of spiritual beasts appear overnight? The heroes of Juda Town who were stationed at the martial arts field woke up and said anxiously with shocked faces. Ever since Juda Town was attacked by spirit beasts, there has never been an attack by 2 groups of spirit beasts in one night. The increasingly frequent attacks by spirit beasts have made these heroes who were originally prepared to defend their hometowns feel the urge to run away at this moment. The timidity of a foreign country. Barton, Yenji, and others also came to Jason's side at this time, and the guards woke up immediately. Vaughn and others, who did not take off their armor even when sleeping, pulled out their swords and killed Jason, and Yenji and others were surrounded in the middle. Vaughn, protect Master and Mississippi. Even Barton's face showed a trace of solemnity at this moment, and he could hear something from the previous beast's roar. It seems to be the 4th-level hurricane-toothed tiger. Old Renaud, who came out last, suddenly said. At this moment, a black shadow suddenly rushed in from outside the town. Who? The adventurers on the martial arts training ground became nervous and drew out their weapons one after another. A figure covered in blood appeared from the darkness. It was actually the adventurer Ide who had entered the Uto Mountains alone before. His right arm was completely missing at this moment and he was bleeding profusely. What's going on, Ide? Someone among the adventurers shouted. Everyone, run away. Ide's face was full of panic, he rushed forward desperately and let out a roar. Whoosh! A black shadow suddenly jumped in from outside the town. This leap actually spanned a distance of more than 10 meters and came directly behind Nade. It bit Ide's mouth like lightning with a bloody mouth. Waste. Crack. The ear-piercing sound of bones shattering reached everyone's ears. The black figure bit Ide's waist in one bite, and then swallowed his lower body directly into his stomach. Ah! Ide, who had lost his lower body, was rolling in pain on the ground, letting out a heart-rending scream. Crazy violent spirit fruit, there is a violent spirit fruit on the mountain behind Ide. After saying the last sentence, the upper body was swallowed directly by the black shadow. Violent spirit fruit? There was a sudden commotion in the crowd. Jason's eyes couldn't help but light up. No wonder the spiritual beast on the Uchua Mountains was so crazy. The black shadow came slowly. At this moment, everyone no longer cared about the shocking news that there was a violent spirit fruit on the mountain. Only then did they see the shape of the black shadow. It was a spiritual beast about 1 foot tall, with blue-black fur. Under the light of the fire, it exuded a penetrating light, and there were 2 sharp fangs at the corners of its mouth. Hurricane-toothed tiger, it's hurricane-toothed tiger. 4th level spiritual beast, hurricane-toothed tiger. There were screams of horror from the crowd. The strongest adventurer present was only Tan En, a 3rd level intermediate spiritual master. Although there were 20 or 30 people in the entire crowd, a 4th level hurricane-toothed tiger could definitely kill all of them easily. A 4th level spiritual beast? After hearing these words, the hero of Judah town not far away turned pale with fright, without a trace of blood. A 4th level spirit beast can definitely be considered a powerful being among spirit beasts. Such a spirit beast can definitely cause a disaster even in Blue Tile City, let alone a small giant tower town. Roar! The hurricane-toothed tiger's dark red eyes swept around, and the cold eyes made all the adventurers tremble in their hearts. The hurricane-toothed tiger then pounced, and the sharp claws swung at an adventurer at will. Pung! The adventurer didn't have time to react. The long sword in his hand was directly smashed away, and his body was completely smashed by the hurricane-toothed tiger's claws. Go to hell! Another adventurer raised his sword high and slashed away with all his strength. Huh! The hurricane-toothed tiger accelerated in vain, and a phantom flashed by. The adventurer was instantly killed, and then 2 rows of sharp teeth directly bit the adventurer's head into pieces. Ah! The crowd roared, and all the adventurers around them swung their swords at the hurricane-toothed tiger. Under the hurricane-toothed tiger's dodge, almost all the swords missed. Occasionally, 2 people struck the hurricane-toothed tiger. The tiger's body didn't even have a cut on its fur, so it couldn't break the hurricane-toothed tiger's defense. Whoosh! 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 The hurricane-toothed tiger flashed in the crowd, and every blow brought a fresh life. It's too fast. Among the 4th level spiritual beasts, hurricane-toothed tiger is originally good at speed. Its attack can be defended, but its defense is not strong. However, the strongest among these adventurers are only the intermediate spiritual master, Tan, and 2 low-level spiritual masters. The remaining, they were all spiritual warriors and spiritual disciples. Under the attack of the hurricane-toothed tiger, it was simply a massacre. In the blink of an eye, nearly 10 of the 23 adventurers died. Run away! With our strength, we can't break the defense of this hurricane-toothed tiger. The only way to stay is to die. After the short battle, the adventurers no longer had the courage to resist, and they attacked with all their strength. A chop on the body of the hurricane-toothed tiger would not be able to damage it at all, but the hurricane-toothed tiger could easily kill them. Escape. They have only one choice. The surviving people fled frantically in all directions. No matter how powerful the hurricane-toothed tiger was, there was only one. With so many adventurers fleeing in all directions, how many of the hurricane-toothed tigers could be killed? Quick, tell the people in the town to run away. Seeing the adventurers running away, the heroes of Giant Tower Town also ran towards the town. The entire martial arts training ground was in chaos, but Jason and his group remained unmoved. A 4th level spiritual beast is really powerful. The attack and defense of this hurricane-toothed tiger seem to be average, but its speed is much faster than mine. I don't know if my current attack can break through its defense. Jason looked at hurricane-toothed tiger with bright eyes. Ever since he was promoted to a senior spiritual disciple and killed the mad wolf Jivan, Jason was no longer a match for ordinary senior spiritual masters. At this moment, he was secretly fighting against the 4th level spiritual disciple. Compare the beast hurricane-toothed tiger. The hurricane-toothed tiger's dark red eyes looked around, exhaling white air from its nose, and immediately fixed its gaze on Jason and the others not far away. Roar! A low and vague voice sounded, and the hurricane-toothed tiger rushed directly towards Jason and the others. Vaughn, protect Miss and the others, I will deal with this hurricane-toothed tiger. Barton said calmly, looking at the hurricane-toothed tiger that was rushing towards him. Humph, you're just standing there stupidly in the face of hurricane-toothed tiger. You're just an idiot. Tan, who was running away, saw that Jason's group had no intention of escaping, and he couldn't help but sneered in his heart, although the guard leader Chang, I'm afraid he is just a high-level spiritual master, and the rest are just high-level spiritual masters. The hurricane-toothed tiger is a 4th-level spiritual beast. If you stay here, you are simply seeking death. Many adventurers who were running took the time to turn and look back. Seeing the hurricane-toothed tiger rushing towards Jason and the others, thinking about how powerful Vaughn and the others were previously, I couldn't help but feel a little hopeful, but more importantly, it was a pity. Obviously, when facing the 4th-level spiritual beast, the hurricane-toothed tiger, they don't think highly of Vaughn and the others. When they thought that Yanji, a woman as mature and charming as a peach, would die at the mouth of a hurricane-toothed tiger, these adventurers couldn't help but feel regretful in their hearts. Hey, the middle-aged man who has been in the team is up. At this moment, the adventurers discovered that the group of armored guards and others had shrunk the formation, and the 4 young men, women, and old men where they were surrounded in the middle, but the middle-aged man among the 4 slowly walked out of the crowd. Looking at the fierce charging hurricane-toothed tiger, Barton slowly circulated the spiritual power of the senior sect spiritual master in his body. A trace of surging spiritual power surged and roared in Barton's body, making Barton feel a little excited. Hey, little guy, let me play with you. Barton burst out with a hearty laugh. Phew! Seeing someone actually dared to stop in front of him, the previous killings made this hurricane-toothed tiger feel a trace of contempt for everyone on the training ground. His body accelerated violently in the middle of the road, transforming into a maiming streak. Film. Roar. The hurricane-toothed tiger opened its bloody mouth and swung its sharp claws towards Barton's head. Stop! Barton roared, without even taking out the long sword from his waist. His hands grabbed a pair of hurricane-toothed tiger's forelimbs like lightning. Just like a meteorite hitting the earth, a man and an animal collided together instantly. A large amount of smoke and dust filled the air instantly. Barton's entire body was pushed out for several meters, and his feet plowed a deep ravine on the yellow soil of the training ground. And finally stopped the urge to retreat. The 1-foot-tall hurricane-toothed tiger was lifted into the air by Barton, just like a man lifting a small truck. Haha! Barton laughed, clamping the hurricane-toothed tiger's forelimbs tightly with his hands like giant pincers, and then slammed it towards the ground. Boom! Countless smoke and dust filled the air, and a huge crater with a radius of 1 foot suddenly appeared on the hard loose ground. Barton raised his hands high and smashed it down again. Boom! 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 The loud rumbling sound echoed in the martial arts training ground, which was also mixed with the angry roar of the hurricane-toothed tiger, which sounded in the billowing smoke. Go! Barton waved hard, and the hurricane-toothed tiger rolled and was knocked far away. His body jumped suddenly in the middle and landed firmly on the martial arts training ground. His body was covered with dust, and there was still some blood in the tiger's mouth. The red eyes stared at Barton in front of him with cold murderous intent, with a hint of anger and fear in them, but they were extremely embarrassed. The 4th-level hurricane-toothed tiger is good at speed, and its power is only slightly stronger than that of ordinary 3rd-level spiritual beasts. When Barton, who is a 5th-level senior spiritual master, caught him, it was difficult to resist for a while. How is this possible? The adventurers and the heroes of Giant Tower Town who were originally running away all stopped involuntarily after Barton blocked the hurricane-toothed tiger's charge, and when Barton smashed the hurricane-toothed tigers at that moment, he actually stood there in shock, with an incredible look in his eyes. The hurricane-toothed tiger is a 4th-level spiritual beast. And this middle-aged man can beat the hurricane-toothed tiger to this level. What kind of strength does that have? All the adventurers were stunned for a moment and looked at Jason and the others. When he saw it, his eyes were full of fear. Roar! Hurricane-toothed tiger stared at Barton, and with a roar, all the green fur stood on end in an instant, and a faint blue-gray light gradually emerged around hurricane-toothed tiger's body. Haha, little guy, you want to do it again? Barton laughed, and the previous smash made him feel good. Waves of tiny whirlwinds continued to gather around hurricane-toothed tiger's body, and then dispersed. A breeze blew in vain throughout the huge training ground. The hurricane-toothed tiger opened its huge mouth, and a blue-gray wind whirlpool instantly condensed in its mouth. In a moment, it was the size of a washbasin, and it was still growing rapidly. There was a solemn look on Barton's face. What the hurricane-toothed tiger was brewing at this moment was its unique spiritual skill, which was also the origin of the name hurricane-toothed tiger. No longer caring about playing around, Barton's figure skyrocketed in vain, and he shot toward the hurricane-toothed tiger like lightning. Roar! A roar sounded, and a hint of cunning flashed in the dark red eyes of the hurricane-toothed tiger. A several-foot-high, tornado-like blue-gray hurricane formed, but it did not shoot at Barton, who was striking like lightning, but brought it with him. With boundless power, it swept towards where Yan-Ji and others were. The 4th-level spiritual beast has begun to possess a certain degree of spiritual intelligence. It can see that Barton is powerful, and knows that its own attack may not be able to kill Barton. However, the group of people behind the human in front of it are not as strong as this human. It's not as powerful as his. Not good. Barton was shocked when he saw the direction in which the hurricane was sweeping. Although he was not afraid of the hurricane-toothed tiger's vigorous blow, the strongest Vaughn on Miss Yanji's side was only a senior spiritual master, and he could not connect intermittently. Come down this powerful hurricane with level 4 power. Ignoring the attack on the hurricane-toothed tiger, Barton's figure turned in vain during the sprint. A ray of light suddenly lit up on the surface of Barton's body. Barton's speed suddenly surged in an instant, and he hit the hurricane like a meteor. Boom! With the loud noise, the leather armor on Barton's body was torn apart in an instant, and the giant hurricane also exploded with a loud noise. Boom! 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 Countless blue-gray wind blades were like hail in the sky, splitting apart and cutting in all directions. Some of those wind blades flew high into the sky, and some shot towards the ground. They made a series of puffs, cutting deep ravines on the ground, and more of them were shot at Yan-Ji and others not far away. After all, the direction of the hurricane is where Yan-Ji and others are. Protect Miss. Vaughn's eyes bulged, he shouted loudly, and he rushed forward first, while the more than 10 guards also stopped in front of Yan-Ji and others regardless of their own safety. Pft! 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 The guards were all slashing with their swords and blocking with their bodies at this moment. Blood flowers bloomed on the bodies of the guards, and more than a dozen guards intercepted them in an instant. A large number of wind blades were rained down, but the wind blades were so densely packed that more than 10 guards could not intercept them. With an accident, 2 wind blades passed through the gap between the bodies of the 2 guards, split into 2 directions, and shot towards Yan-Ji behind. Miss! Vaughn roared in his mouth, intending to block it, but the speed of the wind blade was too fast. How could he make it in time? In a moment of confusion, Vaughn was hit hard by several wind blades, and the fine steel, the armor was immediately left with tiny dents and cracks. Barton in the distance was also extremely frightened at this moment, but he could only watch helplessly as the 2 wind blades struck Yan-Ji. The wind blades in Yan-Ji's pupils grew sharply, and she stood there blankly, unable to react. In her eyes, there were only 2 wind blades exuding the aura of death, whistling, in the whole world. The sound of breaking through the sky was directed towards him. Pung! At the critical moment, a not-so-tall figure appeared in front of Yan-Ji like lightning, and forcefully took the two wind blades. It was Jason who had been standing next to Yanji. With the sound of cloth tearing, Jason's robe was cut into countless pieces by the strong wind stirred by two wind blades. In an instant, Jason's figure, which was not that tall, looked majestic in Yanji's eyes at this moment. Incomparable, indomitable. Miss Yanji, are you okay? Jason turned his head and smiled lightly. With his strong body, the two small wind blades could not hurt him, but only left two tiny cuts on his chest. The red seal disappeared after a moment. Seeing the faint smile on Jason's face, Yanji, who was reborn after the disaster, was speechless for a moment. Her chest was heaving with excitement, which dazzled Jason's eyes. Jason! Old Renault hurriedly stepped forward to check Jason's body. He knew that Jason was just a spiritual disciple. Although he had learned about the strength of Jason's body when Jason and Toss fought, after all, father and son Lian Xian's face was still pale with worry. Father, I'm fine. Old Renault checked carefully and found that Jason was indeed not injured, and then breathed out with relief. When the hurricane-toothed tiger released the hurricane earlier, the adventurers were stunned. They were even more horrified when they saw Barton actually blocking the hurricane with his body. Then they saw the group of guards risking their lives to block the wind blade. Jason used his body to withstand the slashes of two wind blades without any injuries, and all the adventurers became numb. Even if Tan, who is an intermediate spiritual master, can use his sword to chop the wind blade, it will be fine. If he simply blocks it with his body, he will probably be seriously injured even if he is not dead. However, the boy is unscathed. What is this like? Strength? What frightened the adventurers the most was that this young man did not seem to be under 20. These people don't know that Jason's strength is good, but in terms of level, he is only a high-level spiritual disciple. Seeing that his goal had not been achieved, Hurricane-Toothed Tiger turned around and shot towards the back mountain like lightning. When Barton saw that Yanji was fine, he turned around suddenly, his eyes red. If it weren't for Jason's block, Yanji might have died just now, and all this was just because he didn't use all his strength. In his opinion, a fourth-level Hurricane-Toothed Tiger couldn't do anything in front of him. Tricks. In fact, it wasn't Barton's fault just now. It can only be said that the Hurricane-Toothed Tiger was too cunning. But Barton felt a trace of guilt in his heart, both for Yanji and Jason. A murderous intention continued to rise in his heart. Looking at the Hurricane-Toothed Tiger that was speeding past the back hill, Barton slowly drew out the long sword at his waist. This is a long sword engraved with exquisite spiritual talismans. The silver-white sword body exudes a dazzling light under the firelight of the martial arts training ground. You evil beast, die! Barton suddenly waved the sword in his hand. Call! Amidst the sharp sound of breaking through the air, a silver-white sword light quickly tore through the sky and instantly came behind the Hurricane-Toothed Tiger. Pfft! The Hurricane-Toothed Tiger's entire body was directly cut in half under the silver-white sword light, and blood spilled wildly in the air. In his rage, Barton, although he did not release his spiritual ring, had already used all his strength. As a master of the Oliver family, the weapon in his hand was also a very powerful spiritual weapon. The previous attack by Barton was no longer effective. It was weaker than an ordinary blow from a 6th-level low-level spiritual master. The Hurricane-Toothed Tiger was fast, but its defense was weak among the 4th-level spiritual beasts. Naturally, it was cut into two pieces with one sword without any suspense. Thank you very much to Brother Lai 2 and Brother Smoker for the reward. Haha, I also congratulate Brother Lai 2 for being promoted to a disciple of this book, entering the palace, and becoming a real spiritual master. Next, there will be great blessings, hee. And gone like the wind, brother. It's obvious that you have read the book carefully, and your comments are very meaningful. I also think it is a criticism that the protagonist's realm is slow to improve, and the strength of the protagonist who has just come up from the starting point different from novels that progress by leaps and bounds, and then reach the 9th level, and then develop the plot at this level, when Shaoshur wrote it, he followed a step-by-step approach, and the plots developed slowly one by one, until Shaoshur understood the strength of the protagonist of the book. At that time, the entire tone of the book has been set, but in fact, the protagonist is of a low level, but his strength is not low. Brother Vanish, like the wind, said a lot of things to Shaoshur's heart. It can be seen that Brother Vanish must have read a lot of novels. When writing this book, Shaoshur has been thinking about why this book is so popular on the internet. My grades are not good. I have been writing books for a year or two. I have been writing novels for 4 or 5 years. After writing several million words, I have some experience. Recently, I have been reading books non-stop, absorbing the experience of the masters. Some are learning from Tomato, and some are learning from other books. However, each author has a different style and the writing method of the book is also different. In this book, maybe brothers will see that Shaoshur uses different techniques to write it, not for anything else, just to improve his writing skills, so that brothers can enjoy reading it. Every author wants to write a classic, but this one doesn't work. I will continue to work hard on the next one. However, I hope that brothers can watch Shaoshur grow up little by little. In the following content, Shaoshur will also work harder. Let Shaoshur and Jason in the book work together to slowly grow and become stronger. Brothers will definitely be able to see the glorious moment between Jason and Shaoshur. Shaoshur firmly believes certainly. Sword light, sword light. Jason stared blankly, but his mind was filled with the sword light that Barton slashed out earlier. That seemingly light but extremely domineering attack shocked Jason's soul. Poof! Jason chopped it down with a hand knife, and the spiritual power in his body surged, leaving the body along with the meridians, but instantly dissipated in the air. Although the current Jason can make the spiritual power in his body spurt out from his meridians at the moment of the punch, it is fundamentally different from the sword light that Barton slashed before. One is pure spiritual power that will dissipate after leaving the body. The other spiritual power has a unique composition and structure. The arrangement of spiritual elements contains mystery. The condensed power is extremely powerful and violent, with the power of destruction. This kind of spiritual power structure is extremely stable but extremely destructive. Why exactly? Jason frowned and thought hard. Jason, who has not even reached the level of a spiritual master and cannot even release spiritual power on his body, now understands the spiritual power separation attack that can only be possessed by those who have reached the level of a sect spiritual master. Zong Spirit Master, that middle-aged man is actually a Zong Spirit Master, and he should be an extremely powerful Zong Spirit Master. Otherwise, it would be impossible for the sword light he released to split the 4th-level spiritual beast Hurricane-Toothed Tiger into pieces with just one sword. 2 halves. Seeing the sword light released by Barton splitting the Hurricane-Toothed Tiger in half instantly, all the adventurers on the training ground were shocked. In the training of spiritual masters, there are obvious differences at each level. The 1st-level spiritual disciples can only circulate spiritual power in the body, while the 2nd-level spiritual masters can cover the surface of the body with spiritual power to improve protection and attack. Ability: only 3rd-level spiritual masters can infuse spiritual power into items such as weapons in their hands. 4th-level heavenly spiritual masters can even rely on their weapons to display swords of a certain length. And 5th-level Zonglings, the master, can release sword light and sword light plasma attacks. In the Kingdom of Orlando, the 5th-level sect spiritual master is definitely considered the top powerhouse. The most powerful person in the entire Orlando Kingdom and the first spiritual master in the palace is a 7th-level low-level imperial spiritual master. There are about a dozen 6th-level spiritual masters in the entire Kingdom of Orlando, including junior, middle, and high levels. Most of them are in the palace of the royal city, and the remaining ones are the strongest in some provinces. And not every province in the kingdom has a spiritual master. The most powerful person in many provinces is a senior spiritual master. This shows how frightened these adventurers were when they saw a powerful man at the level of a sect spirit master here. Master Jason, are you okay? Barton didn't even glance at the body of the hurricane-toothed tiger. He took back his sword and hurriedly came to the crowd and asked with concern. We're fine. Jason shook his head. At this moment, he had put on a new suit of clothes, but in his mind, he still recalled Barton's sword from time to time. Yenji also shook her head, and then glanced at Jason secretly, with a hint of blush on her face. She didn't know if it was because of the previous disaster or for other reasons. It's okay, Master Jason. It was me who scared you earlier. If the way Barton looked at Jason before was purely peaceful and respectful, then the way Barton looks at Jason now in his eyes, more gratitude was revealed. Uncle Barton, this is not your fault. If it hadn't been for you, we might not have survived the hurricane-toothed tiger's attack earlier. Yenji comforted Barton. Barton still shook his head with some guilt, then came to Vaughn and other guards and asked, Vaughn, how are you doing? Lord Barton, there is nothing wrong with us. Except for some minor injuries to some brothers, it will not affect our journey tomorrow. Vaughn also had a trace of guilt on his face. Fortunately, Master Jason is here. If those two wind blades had hit Miss Yenji before, then Vaughn already couldn't imagine the consequences. Vaughn, the guard captain of the Oliver family, was also very grateful to Jason. Miss Yenji, I want to go into the mountains tomorrow, so you should go first. Father, you also follow Miss Yenji and the others. Jason said suddenly. A trace of doubt suddenly appeared on Yenji's face. This? Master Jason, why are you doing this? What's wrong with you going into the mountain? She was a little hard to understand. Is it for the violent spirit fruit? Barton looked at Jason. Jason nodded. No. Old Renault said hurriedly, Jason, although this violent spirit fruit is good, even the hurricane-toothed tiger appeared just now. There must be more powerful spirit beasts in the Yuto Mountains. If you go, you won't be able to use it at all. It's impossible to grab the violent spirit fruit. Father, don't worry. Although this violent spirit fruit is very important, if very powerful spiritual beasts really appear, I won't be stupid enough to snatch it from those spiritual beasts. I would rather what matters most is the rhizome and leaves of the violent spirit fruit, and with my current strength, you know that even if I can't beat him, I can still escape. Jason had determination on his face. The rhizome and leaves of the violent spirit fruit? What do you want this for? Both Patton and Renault were confused. Uncle Barton, what exactly is this violent spirit fruit? Yenji couldn't help but wonder. Although she knew a lot about some treasures as a member of the Oliver family, she had never heard of this violent spirit fruit. In this regard, she is not even as good as an ordinary adventurer. Barton said slowly, the violent spirit fruit is a top-grade spiritual fruit. It is created by heaven and earth. Any 5th level spiritual beast including 5th level and below will be promoted to another level in a short time after eating it. And 6th level spiritual beasts, if you eat it, it will increase by 1 level, but it will have no effect on spiritual beasts above level 6. If humans eat it, the effect will not be as good as that of spiritual beasts, but it is not much different. It is a highly cherished gifted treasure. Upgrade to a higher level? Yenji had a look of shock on her face. As a member of a large family, she knew how precious this violent spirit fruit was as soon as she heard it. If it is a spiritual potion, only spiritual potions of the 6th level or above can have such an effect. It can be said that this violent spirit fruit is a bottle of natural 6th level spiritual potion, which shows how precious it is. That's right, if a 4th level heavenly spirit master eats it, he can be promoted to a 5th level zoneling master in a short time. If a 5th level zoneling master eats it, he may be promoted to a 6th level zoneling spiritual master in a short time. If a 6th level intermediate spiritual master eats it, he can be promoted to a 6th level advanced spiritual master. There was a leisurely look on Barton's face. If I eat it, I'm afraid it won't take long to become a low-level spiritual master. He is a spiritual master. But Barton paused and continued, this violent spirit fruit also has a big shortcoming. Those who have taken it will have an extremely difficult time advancing in the future. Although this kind of genius treasure is good, it can greatly deplete people's potential. Only older people who have no hope of promotion in the future or people who urgently need to improve their level will take it. Otherwise, it will cause them to be unable to advance in the future, which is not worth the loss. However, this violent spirit fruit is not worth the loss. Spirit beasts don't seem to have this restriction. Even so, the violent spirit fruit is still a rare treasure. What are the functions of the roots and leaves of the violent spirit fruit? Yenji glanced at Jason and continued to ask curiously. The rhizome and leaves of the violent spirit fruit? Barton was stunned, and then shook his head. You have to ask Master Jason about this. I don't know. Spiritual beasts generally only eat the violent spirit fruit, while the roots and leaves will stay there, but the rhizome of the violent spirit fruit is said to be highly poisonous. Once the violent spirit fruit appeared, a spiritual master ate the rhizome without snatching the spirit fruit. As a result, he died directly among a group of spirits who were snatching the spirit fruit. In front of the teacher. Yenji suddenly looked at Jason expectantly. Jason smiled. I hope this root will naturally have a use. The violent spirit fruit can improve the level of the spiritual master, and its root can improve the physical quality of the spiritual master. As for the spiritual master who was poisoned, just because he just took the rhizome incorrectly. Jason, who was a 9th level elixir master in his previous life, naturally knows how powerful the rhizome of the violent spirit fruit is. For Jason, although the violent spirit fruit can also make him improve the level, but that stem is the treasure that Jason dreams of. The rhizome of the violent spirit fruit can improve physical fitness, strengthen muscles and bones, and give people great strength. If taken properly, an ordinary man can have tens of thousands of pounds of strength. For an ordinary spiritual master, perhaps physical fitness and great strength are nothing, but for Jason, who is in the line of violent spiritual masters and needs to constantly improve his physical fitness, it is extremely important. The leaves of the violent spirit fruit are the materials for several extremely important spiritual potions. They are even the main material of a 7th level spiritual potion. Moreover, what Barton said earlier is that the violent spirit fruit can consume a person's potential, and it will be difficult to increase the strength after taking it. This is not necessarily the case. It's just that people in 3,000 years still don't know the real method of taking the violent spirit fruit. Although Jason was a 9th level elixir master in his previous life, the violent spirit fruit was a genius treasure after all. It was too rare, so he never got it. Now that he had discovered it, Jason naturally didn't want to return empty-handed. In this case, we will stay here tomorrow. When Master Jason gets the rhizome of the violent spirit fruit, we will continue to the royal city. Yenji spoke with a bright smile on her face. Miss Yenji, this Jason was stunned. Although the spirit beasts on the mountain are rioting and even coming down to attack humans, it means that the violent spirit fruit is about to mature, but it is also possible that the violent spirit fruit still needs another. It will take a few days to mature. Wouldn't this delay Miss Yenji's schedule? It's okay. Yenji smiled and said, anyway, there are still more than 2 months until the family's auction in the royal city, so I'm not in a hurry. Rush to the royal city, Master Jason, it's settled. Vaughn. Yenji suddenly said sharply. Here, miss. Vaughn stepped forward hurriedly. Send 2 people to take this family token to the nearby Blue Wa City and ask the family's garrison in Lan Wa City to send some people over. Yenji took out an Oliver family token from her body. Remember to go overnight now and send people over as quickly as possible. Yenji's tone was unquestionable. She glanced at the group of adventurers not far away. Those people also know about the violent spirit fruit and want to come here. It's going to be busy here in 2 days, so we need to send some people over quickly. Yes, Mississippi. Vaughn took the token from Yenji's hand and immediately ordered 2 previously uninjured guards to take the token with them. Head to Blue City overnight. Amidst the rapid sound of horse hooves, the figures of the 2 guards gradually blended into the night. Uncle Barton. Yenji then said, tomorrow you can also go into the mountain with Master Jason. As long as you are here, Master Jason's safety will be safe. But, Miss, Yenji said. He waved his hand and said, I'm fine. Vaughn and the others are here, and Blue City will send people over soon. You won't encounter anything here, but that's not necessarily the case in the mountains. Okay then. Barton considered after a moment, he nodded. It is true that in Giant Tower Town, as long as no extremely powerful spiritual beast comes down, no one of those adventurers would dare to offend Yenji and the others. Moreover, this place is not far from Lanwa City. If you rush there quickly, as long as it takes less than a day, if the manpower from Lanwa City rushes here, I think we can arrive tomorrow afternoon or evening. After the previous disturbance of the hurricane-toothed tiger, no one was much sleepy. The 2 guards dragged back the body of the hurricane-toothed tiger, which was split into 2 parts by Barton, and disposed of it under the guidance of Jason. Yenji and the others don't need the 2nd-level wind wolf corpse, but the 4th-level hurricane-toothed tiger is different. It is full of treasures. Not to mention anything else, just the 4th-level wind crystal core. The value is at least 50,000 spirit coins. In addition, there are a series of things such as fur, blood, teeth, internal organs, bones, etc., which are all materials for preparing elixirs or alchemy. However, Vaughn and the others were not adventurers after all, but family guards of the Oliver family. They were too clumsy to deal with the corpses of spiritual beasts. After half a day's work, they could not even peel off a single piece of fur from the hurricane-toothed tiger. Let me do it. The 2 guards in front of him were sweating profusely, their faces were red, and they looked miserable. Jason couldn't stand it anymore, so he took a sharp scalpel from one of the guards and came to before the half-carcass of the hurricane-toothed tiger. The guard who was doing the dissection stepped away in embarrassment and wiped his bloody hands. There were beads of sweat on his forehead. For him, a family guard, the task of dissecting the corpse of a spirit beast is too arduous. He has no idea where to start. If he had a choice, he would rather fight the spirit beast than dissect the corpse. Jason took a scalpel and placed several empty medicine bottles next to the body of the hurricane-toothed tiger. Then the scalpel in his hand casually poked the half-shaped body of the hurricane-toothed tiger a few times. It was originally split into 2 pieces. On the corpse, which seemed to be bleeding almost completely, a few streaks of blood suddenly spurted out from the small holes that had been poked, and accurately splashed into the empty medicine bottles. When the blood was almost gone, Jason moved the medicine bottle away, and waved his right hand holding the scalpel like lightning, and phantoms kept dancing on the body of the hurricane-toothed tiger. Whoosh! 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 Everyone present only had time to see a few phantoms. The originally complete half-body of the hurricane-toothed tiger was completely dispersed into individual pieces in the next moment. Bones, muscles, internal organs, and fur were neatly piled aside. Jason followed suit, and the other half of the hurricane-toothed tiger's body was completely processed by Jason with lightning speed. Okay. Jason stood up and clapped his hands with a relaxed look on his face. There was not even a drop of blood on the hand he had dissected earlier. Everyone present was stunned for a moment, especially the 2 guards who didn't know how to deal with it. They were stunned. Strong, really too strong, the hurricane-toothed tiger is a 4th-level spiritual beast. Its fur and muscles are extremely dense and tough, and the structure of its bones is even more complex and abnormal. The 2 senior spiritual warrior-level guards cut them open for a long time without even cutting them off. The bones were separated, and Jason just slashed a few times at random, and the body of the hurricane-toothed tiger seemed to be naturally scattered into a pile. These guards, who didn't know Jason's accomplishments in elixirs, didn't quite understand the extremely respectful behavior of Miss Yanji and Lord Barton towards this young man who didn't look very big. But now they saw that he was indeed a capable person. It can't be compared to the guards like myself. None of them knew that Jason, who was a 9th-level elixir master in his previous life, was very familiar with the dissection of spirit beast corpses. Among the crowd, only Barton could vaguely see that each of Jason's swords landed at extremely precise points, where the muscles and bone structures were the weakest, and the directions where Jason's bloodletting sword struck where it is also the existence of the hidden blood vessel aorta node in the body of the hurricane-toothed tiger. Every time the knife is stabbed, it will go straight to the vital point. Barton had to admit that in terms of understanding the body structure of spiritual beasts and dissecting corpses, even he, Barton, a senior sect spiritual master, could not compare with Jason at all, let alone those guards. The gap was really too big. The sky gradually became brighter. The adventurers on the martial arts training ground have left a lot after a battle last night. The remaining adventurers and the heroes of Giant Tower Town occasionally looked at Jason and the others, with their eyes on them, full of fear. "Rai!" After dawn, Vaughn shouted to the group of heroes in Tower Town after receiving Yanji's instructions. "My lords, what do you have to say?" A big man walked out from among the heroes of Giant Tower Town. It was Rai, the guard captain of Giant Tower Town yesterday. Although Ray is also a high-level spiritual disciple, at this moment, he appears to be extremely cautious, with an expression full of respect and even more gratitude. If it weren't for Jason and his group, under the attack of the 4th-order spiritual beast hurricane-toothed tiger, their Giant Tower Town wouldn't know what it would be like now. "You said that the hotels in your town are full, so there is no place for so many of us to stay?" Vaughn asked lightly. "Since Miss Yanji decided to stay, she can't live in a tent all the time, okay? If so, it would be better to find a yard to rest." "Ah?" After hearing Vaughn's words, Ray was stunned for a moment with joy. Listening to what this adult said, it seems they want to stay? If they are willing to stay, the safety of the town will be guaranteed. Ray was extremely happy. He saw with his own eyes the middle-aged man in the team yesterday. It was so powerful that he split the 4th-level spiritual beast hurricane-toothed tiger into 2 pieces with one sword. What kind of strength is this? The strongest Lord O'Carroll in Lanwa City is only a low-level sect spiritual master. The strength of the middle-aged man in the team is only stronger than Lord O'Carroll. Huh? Seeing that Ray screamed in surprise and then stayed there without saying a word, Vaughn couldn't help but frowned. Sir, after the adventurers were injured yesterday, some of them left. Now there are many empty rooms in the hotel in the town." Ray woke up from his daze and said hurriedly. After saying this, Ray immediately regretted it. As a senior spiritual disciple, he had a high status in Giant Tower Town, but he had a manor. If these adults were placed in his manor, he would not be able to do more. "Have you had good contact with these adults?" Ray felt a little regretful that he had not seized the opportunity. Now that the words had been spoken, it was hard to say them again. Vaughn nodded, turned around and ordered his men to put away the tent. Soon, Jason and the others arrived at the only hotel in Giant Tower Town. This is a small hotel, called the Giant Tower Hotel. The entire hotel only has 2 floors. It does not occupy a large area and is not luxurious. However, in such a small town, Yanji and the others cannot ask for too much. Sure enough, when Ray took Yanji and the others to inquire, the hotel that had been fully booked by adventurers yesterday was now quite empty, with a total of 8 empty rooms, which could accommodate Jason and his group. As for the adventurers who checked out and left, did they leave because they were injured? Did they leave because they heard about the violent spirit fruit and wanted to go back to gather people to snatch it? Or did they just want to spread the news and simply want to watch the fun? Jason and the others, it's unknown. "Father, Miss Yanji, you can stay here, there is no need to send you off anymore." After breakfast, Jason and Barton did not stop and set off directly towards the back mountain, while Yenji and others took Jason and Barton to the back mountain. Barton was sent to the edge of the martial arts training ground. Master Jason, Uncle Barton, you must be careful. Yenji looked at Jason with concern. Jason nodded, but old Reno said nothing, but patted Jason's shoulder heavily with his rough hands. Father and son were connected. Although old Reno said nothing, Jason could deeply feel his care. Vaughn, you must protect the young lady when I am away. If anything happens to the young lady, I will ask you for it. Barton said coldly. Lord Barton, don't worry, even if Vaughn dies, the lady will not be hurt at all. A trace of determination flashed on Vaughn's face. In the eyes of Yenji and others, Jason and Barton quickly entered the Uchua Mountains behind the giant tower town. Their figures flashed twice in the dense mountain forest and then disappeared. They really stayed because of the violent spirit fruit. Many of the remaining adventurers gathered around the edge of the training ground and whispered. Since they want the violent spirit fruit, I think there is no hope for us. A voice sighed. No hope? Even if they don't want it, do we have hope? I'm afraid that the hurricane-toothed tiger yesterday could have killed all of us here. A disdainful voice came from the crowd. If you can't get it, it's a good idea to go take a look. I haven't seen the violent spirit fruit yet, said another person in the crowd. The adventurers nodded one after another. After a while, many adventurers secretly entered the mountain forest. Although they knew that they could not get the violent spirit fruit at all, their strong greed still gave them a glimmer of hope. Entered the mountain forest. Maybe you will get it yourself. Who knows before the results come out? Jason and Barton were traveling very quickly in the forest. After entering the forest, Jason walked straight forward without asking much about the surroundings. Jason, who came from 3,000 years in the future, knew that the environment where the violent spiritual fruit grew was definitely a place rich in spiritual power, and when ordinary genius exotic treasures mature, the spiritual elements in the world will be more disordered. As a spiritual medicine master, Jason, spiritual consciousness is extremely sensitive to the strangeness of spiritual elements between heaven and earth. The direction that Jason was heading straight at this moment was the place where in his spiritual perception, the spiritual power was relatively abundant but somewhat disordered. At first, Barton was a little curious when he saw Jason just walking forward. Later, after carefully sensing it, he understood Jason's destination and couldn't help but admire Jason's quick thinking. This is also one of the benefits of Jason coming from 3,000 years in the future. The adventurers who sneaked into the Uchua Mountains behind Jason and Barton were not so lucky. The reason why Nade was able to find the violent spirit fruit yesterday was because at night, the roars of spiritual beasts could be heard from time to time in the mountains. Nade searched all the way in the direction where the roars of the spiritual beasts came from. Now that it's daytime, the roaring spirit beast has naturally disappeared. Soon, the adventurers were lost in the dense mountain forest. Hey, Master Jason, there don't seem to be any spiritual beasts in the Uchua Mountains? Barton couldn't help but wonder after walking for quite some time. Yesterday, 8 second-level wind wolves and a 4th-level hurricane-toothed tiger appeared in the martial arts training field of Judah Town. In Barton's original imagination, in order to compete for the violent spiritual fruit, the Uchua Mountains should be full of spiritual beasts, but now after walking for such a long time, the entire Uchua mountain range was empty and silent, but not even a single spiritual beast was found. Jason, who was walking in front, smiled. Brother Barton, the hierarchy between spiritual beasts is much stricter than that of humans. Low-level spiritual beasts have a natural sense of fear when facing high-level spiritual beasts. If a high-level spirit beast occupies the violent spirit fruit, then those spirit beasts with a lower level than it will disperse on their own. This is the law among spirit beasts. Yesterday's wind wolf and hurricane-toothed tiger must have been intimidated by other spirit beasts, and then broke into Giant Tower Town. Jason said decisively, if I guessed correctly, next to the violent spirit fruit, there should be a bigger than the hurricane-toothed tiger. A strong 4th-level spirit beast, but it is more likely to be a 5th-level spirit beast, or even higher. After all, the deterrent between spirit beasts of the same level is not great. If it is an ordinary 4th-level spirit beast, then the hurricane, the toothed tiger, will not run down the mountain, but will compete with the 4th-level spiritual beast. Oh? So that's it. Barton nodded thoughtfully. With the speed of Jason and Barton, they were traveling with all their strength in the mountains and forests, without having to worry about attacks from spiritual beasts. In a short time, they entered the depths of the mountains behind Giant Tower Town. After Jason and Barton passed through a dense forest, a valley appeared in front of them. Feeling the futile and somewhat chaotic spiritual energy elements in front of him, Jason stopped. It should be in this valley. Jason's eyes roamed around the valley. Yesterday, Nate only had a few hours to enter the forest, and his progress in the dark was relatively slow. Once he came to this valley, it's about the same time once. Jason restrained his breath, always paying attention to the surroundings, and carefully entered the valley, while Barton followed Jason with the same vigilance. However, Barton's aura was more subtle than Jason's, and his movements were more agile. If Jason's previous inference was correct, the violent spirit fruit was somewhere in the valley, and there should be a relatively powerful spiritual beast in the valley. This made Barton have to be careful. Barton didn't care about the 4th-level spiritual beast, and Barton was not afraid of the ordinary 5th-level spiritual beast. Even if he encountered a 6th-level spiritual beast, as long as he was more cautious, Barton could escape intact. But Barton is not alone. He has to be careful if he wants to protect Jason. It was extremely quiet in the valley. Jason and Barton carefully observed their surroundings and searched everywhere. Suddenly, there was a faint sound of water in the distance, and Jason's eyes suddenly lit up. Jason lay gently in the grass, motioned for Barton to lie down, and at the same time, he crawled forward gently without making even a trace of sound. Pushing aside the layers of dense grass, Jason looked forward, and a puddle appeared in front of Jason. Found it. Jason's eyes lit up, and Barton, who was following Jason, also came to Jason at this moment and saw the scene in front of him. This is a small pool, with a diameter of more than 20 feet, and in the middle of the pool is a piece of land with a diameter of more than 10 feet. In the middle of the land, there was a small pool. In the pool grew a milky white spiritual root, black leaves, and black fruits. On the black leaves and fruits, there were blue roots. There are fine lines of color, and the entire fruit is faintly glowing with light blue. Almost all spiritual roots are under the water pool, and only a short section of spiritual roots emerges from the surface of the water pool, mainly leaves and fruits. At first glance, this black fruit with light blue light looks ordinary and inconspicuous. A gust of wind blew from the left side of the pool, making Jason almost shiver. The cold pool was the source of violent spiritual fruits. Huh? Jason frowned and sniffed slightly. Jason, who pioneered the elixir science technology stream and used various physical states to prepare elixirs, was extremely sensitive to physical forms such as smells. There was a faint fishy smell in the cold wind that came before. Jason's sharp eyes searched the mountain wall on the left side of the pool. A black figure in the crack of the mountain wall caught Jason's eyes. This is a black spirit beast, with countless white spots on its black fur. At this moment, this spirit beast is lying there quietly, its dark golden pupils looking through the cracks in the cliff into the middle of the pool. The violent spirit fruit. The 5th-level spiritual beast, the ghostly patterned snow leopard. Jason gently touched Barton next to him, then pointed to the hiding place of the ghost-striped snow leopard. After taking a closer look at the violent spirit fruit in the middle of the pool, he gently backed away. Huh. Coming outside the valley, Jason let out a long breath. I'm not sure about the 5th-level snow leopard with ghost patterns. Barton frowned. The ghost pattern snow leopard is the same as the hurricane-toothed tiger. It has extremely high agility and fast speed, but its attack and defense are average. If the two fight, although the spirit beasts of the same level are generally stronger than humans, They have reached the level of a senior sect spiritual master. But Barton was not afraid. But if it comes to robbing things, Barton is not sure. His speed has no advantage at all in front of the ghost pattern snow leopard. More importantly, he has to protect Jason's safety. The most important thing is the spiritual roots and leaves. Just do your best with the violent spirit fruit. Jason said very calmly, let's go back first. Go back? Barton was stunned. The violent spirit fruit, it's about to be ripe, why don't we wait here? I have observed the violent spirit fruit before, and also counted the fine blue lines on the violent spirit fruit. This violent spirit fruit is almost 2 days away from being mature. We will come back the day after tomorrow. Jason knew the characteristics of the violent spirit fruit very well. Barton looked at Jason in surprise. He found that he could not see through Jason more and more. It was true that spiritual medicine masters knew more about genius treasures than ordinary spiritual masters, but for things like violent spiritual fruits, the average elixir master can only roughly judge the time of maturity, but for someone like Jason to be able to judge so accurately, Barton had never heard of it before. What made Barton even more depressed was that when he was in the valley, the ghostly patterned snow leopard was hidden so deeply that he didn't even notice it, but Jason saw it at a glance, which deeply shocked Barton, a senior sect spiritual master. You said that you are very knowledgeable in elixirs, but you are also so strong in perception. Barton was speechless. But now that Jason had made up his mind, Barton followed Jason towards Giant Tower Town. When they were almost at the foot of the mountain, Jason and Barton saw 2 adventurers searching in the forest. The 2 adventurers watched in fear as Jason and Barton walked back to Giant Tower Town, and were stunned for a moment. After returning to the hotel, Jason told Yanji and the others about the matter. Since the violent spirit fruit still had 2 days to mature, everyone decided to stay for another 2 days. In the afternoon, many adventurers who failed to find the violent spirit fruit came back dejected, while some adventurers continued to search in the mountains and forests. However, Jason and the others in the hotel also felt that there seemed to be more and more adventurers in Tower Town. In the evening, a group of people entered Giant Tower Town from the direction of Blue Wa City, led by the 2 guards sent by Vaughn last night. After asking the guards in Giant Tower Town, this group of people came directly outside the Giant Tower Hotel. Miss Yanji, Lord Barton, I am Mold, the head of the Oliver Auction House in Blue Tile City. In Barton's room, an extremely shrewd old man with bright eyes and a mustache bowed in front of him. That, full of respect. Behind him, there were 2 extremely tall spiritual masters standing with their heads bowed with a strong aura. Baron Mold, thank you for your hard work. Yanji nodded. The direct children of her family still knew the chief responsible persons of the family in various cities. You already know the reason why you want to come here. This time, it is mainly to cooperate with Master Jason to obtain the violent spirit fruit. If Master Jason needs anything, he will inform you. From now on, his orders are equal to my orders. Yanji said sharply. Miss Yanji, I understand. Mold nodded hurriedly. This time, I have brought all the elites in Lanwa City. This one is Commander Balmer of the Auction House Guards. He is an intermediate heavenly spirit master, and this one is the deputy commander of Carmela, a low-level heavenly spirit master. Although he didn't know who Master Jason was in Yanji's mouth, the shrewd Mold quickly took the order. Tisk. In his room, Jason stood proudly, slashing down with a hand knife, and a large amount of spiritual power suddenly spurted out from the meridians in his right hand and dissipated in the air. No. Jason frowned. If you want to release the sword light, the spiritual power in your body must form an extremely stable special arrangement at the moment it is ejected. However, the spiritual elements in this spiritual power are extremely disordered. The particles of the spiritual elements are too close to each other, and they themselves have extremely different characteristics. It is not easy to form a stable structure due to the huge repulsive force. What's more, the number of spiritual element particles in each small stream of spiritual power is hundreds of millions. If you want to arrange them all together in an instant, it will take a long time. It is too difficult and impossible to complete. I am afraid that even the spiritual consciousness of a ninth-level spiritual master cannot control and arrange hundreds of millions of spiritual element particles at the same time. So why can it be done as soon as one reaches the level of a fifth-level spiritual master? What about releasing spiritual power? Jason couldn't understand. Jason, who possesses knowledge 3,000 years beyond the present and is a spiritual medicine master, knows that the most essential component of so-called spiritual power is the tiniest spiritual power atoms. The number of spiritual power atoms contained in each spiritual power is extremely large, and there are slight differences between the spiritual power atoms of different attributes. When the spiritual medicine master prepares the spiritual potion, he uses his spiritual consciousness to control the interaction of the spiritual elements composed of these spiritual power atoms. Reactions produce substances with different structures and different effects. However, no matter how powerful the spiritual medicine master is, no matter how precise his spiritual knowledge is, the spiritual elements he controls are calculated in units of shares. In each stream of spiritual elements, the number of spiritual power atoms is at least in the hundreds of millions. With Jason's current strength as a spiritual disciple, even though he has far more knowledge than he has now, he still doesn't understand why a spiritual master can arrange spiritual elements in a special structure to release spiritual power as soon as he reaches the level of a sect spiritual master. Jason wanted to analyze the reason from the most essential principles, but ended up getting more and more confused. Forget it, since you can't understand it yet, let's let it go. Jason shook his head, but there was no discouragement in his eyes. Now Jason is only a senior spiritual disciple. With the strength of a senior spiritual disciple, he can understand the skills that only a sect spiritual master can perform. It is normal to fail. Jason is very relaxed. Let's go for a walk. Jason, who had been practicing for a long time, took a deep breath, opened the door and walked out. Looking at Balmer and Carmela following behind him, Jason couldn't help but smile bitterly. Balmer and Carmela Jason also met last night. After meeting Jason, Yenji immediately asked Balmer and Carmela to be responsible for Jason's security during this period. Which made Jason a little speechless. Although Jason was confident in his own strength, Yenji and the others didn't know it. Under Yenji's strong request, Jason finally had to agree. After all, they were doing it for his own good. Jason was a little uncomfortable at first, but he soon got used to it. After all, in his previous life, Jason had personal guards when he traveled, but they were all famous 9th-level Holy Spirit masters on the mainland. It is now morning. As a small town, Giant Tower Town normally does not have many people on the street. However, at this moment, there are many adventurers with weapons in their hands walking through it. These are adventurers who came from all over the country after hearing the news, and there are only a few adventurers in Giant Tower Town. The vast majority of adventurers are currently searching for traces of violent spiritual fruits in the Yuto Mountains. Until now, apart from Jason and the others, no one has heard that anyone has found the location of the violent spirit fruit. However, it is also possible that someone has found the location of the violent spirit fruit, but has not spread the news, and wants to wait until the spirit fruit matures to monopolize it. Of course, this possibility is not high. With the quality of the adventurers in Giant Tower Town, once they enter the vicinity of the cold pool, they will inevitably be surprised by the ghostly patterned snow leopard. The only result of being shocked by the ghostly patterned snow leopard is death. Huh? Pei Lai, it's you. An angry voice suddenly appeared in Jason's ears. Jason looked up and saw 3 seemingly strong men standing not far away. One of them was looking angrily at an adventurer wearing gray leather armor and a beard directly in front of Jason. Chaplain? Hearing the angry roar of the big man, the adventurer raised his head in surprise. When he saw the big man, his face couldn't help but change, and then he quickly retreated without hesitation. "You've been hit by me and you want to run away?" The big man pulled out the sword from his waist, rushed up with a lunge, and slashed with the sword. Choke! The sound of weapons clashing came. The bearded adventurer took 2 steps back and bumped into a fruit stall on the street behind him. The fruit in the stall suddenly spilled all over the ground. "Be careful." Jason pulled the old man running the stall over in a panic and asked with concern, "Are you okay, old man?" The old man didn't respond. He just looked at the fruit scattered on the ground with a worried face, and wanted to. "I went to pick it up, but I didn't dare to step forward. This fruit stand is the source of his entire livelihood." "Huh." Seeing that the blow missed, the big man rushed forward 2 steps and swung the sword again. The adventurer eagerly dodged back again, turned his head and saw Jason behind him. He couldn't help but be startled, and his figure suddenly faltered. Poof! Blood light floated in the air, and a gash was cut on the adventurer's arm, and blood spurted out. The adventurer didn't care. He walked around Jason in a few steps and ran towards the other side of the street. This adventurer was also one of the 20 or 30 adventurers that night. He had naturally seen Jason before. Knowing that Barton was so powerful, he had to stop after seeing Jason standing behind him. If Jason it's just an ordinary person. In order to dodge, the adventurer would have hit him directly. The big man chasing the adventurer roared, brandishing a sword in his hand, and shouted to Jason and the others who were blocking him, "Get out of here, dash!" Before he could say, "Get out of here," there was a flash of green light. Boom! A sharp howl sounded in the air, followed closely by screams. The big man looked at Balmer next to Jason in horror. His face was pale, and he was covering his right hand. There was a blood mark on the wrist of his right hand. The sword fell to his feet, and the tendon of his hand was broken. From the beginning to the end, he didn't see the opponent draw his sword at all. Balmer slowly inserted the long sword back into the scabbard and said indifferently, "Go away." The big man and the 2 companions standing behind him looked at each other, knowing that Balmer had shown mercy and had been defeated. Escape. Jason shook his head, and in the eyes of the astonished passers-by around him, he led Balmer and Carmela back to the hotel. In the minds of the townspeople of Giant Tower Town who were attacked by spiritual beasts, the more adventurers there were in Giant Tower Town, the more at ease they would feel. However, with the increase in adventurers in the past 2 days, some incidents have occurred one after another. Although the vast majority of adventurers would not bully ordinary civilians, it is not ruled out that there are some extremely domineering ones among the adventurers, and with the increase in the number of adventurers, vendettas and fights between adventurers have become commonplace in the past 2 days. "Get out of the way, get out of the way." Jason returned to the hotel. Just as he was about to go upstairs, there was suddenly a sharp sound of horse hooves and shouts outside the hotel door. A cavalry team of about 20 people stopped directly in front of the Giant Tower Hotel. A knight got off his horse, rushed into the hotel, and went straight to the counter. "Where are your bosses?" The knight shouted to the hotel waiter, "Tell your boss to kick out all the guests in the hotel. We, the adults, have reserved this hotel." "Why?" Some people were in the hotel. The adventurers who had won the meal suddenly became unwilling and stood up one by one with weapons in hand. When Barton and the others upstairs heard the noise below, they all came out curiously and stood in the corridor on the 2nd floor watching the quarrel below. Humph. The knight looked coldly at all the adventurers present, flipped his right hand, and a silver token appeared in front of everyone. "We are the personal guard of Lord Ives, the Lord of Blue Wa City. Do you dare to disobey the order of Commander Tebbet of the City Lord's Mansion?" "Commander Tebbet? The #1 master in Blue Wa City? Lord Tebbet of the low-level sect spiritual master?" There was a sudden noise in the crowd, and Giant Tower Town was in the middle of Lawn Wa City. Within the boundaries of the city, it is under the jurisdiction of Blue Wa City. The adventurers present who can arrive in time are basically adventurers from Blue Wa City and nearby Blue Wa City. Naturally, they are afraid of Lord Natbat. The waiter in Judah town was immediately stunned. The Lord of the Lord's palace of Blue Wa City was beyond the reach of a little waiter like him. The waiter couldn't understand why when Giant Tower Town was attacked by spiritual beasts, he sent people to the city lord's mansion in Blue Wa City to ask for help, but there was no response from the city lord's mansion. However, in the past 2 days, so many adventurers appeared all at once. Now Lianqing, the leaders of the main palace all appeared. Although the adventurers present were unwilling, they still had to go back to the room to pack their things. As the commander of the Blue Wa City Lord's mansion and a low-level sect spiritual master, Tebet was not something that little adventurers like them could do. Offended. It seems that I can't get the violent spiritual fruit. Many adventurers felt sad. Jason walked upstairs with Balmer and the others with a nonchalant expression. Naturally, it was not his turn to worry about such a matter. Someone would handle it. Master Jason. Seeing Jason coming back, Yenji and Barton, who were standing in the corridor, immediately came over to greet them. Master Jason, don't worry, Mold will take care of this matter. Jason just smiled. And everyone returned to the room. At the same time, the remaining people in the cavalry team outside the door also walked in at this moment. Walking at the front was a dignified middle-aged man with brown hair, wearing a silver-white soft armor, and hanging around his waist. Holding a beautiful long sword with gems inlaid on the hilt. Lord Tebet. The knight who came in first hurriedly bowed forward. Yeah. The middle-aged man nodded, and a group of people stood at the counter. Many adventurers who had packed up took their things and walked out quickly, without even daring to look at Tebet and the others. Khoten, take a few people to tidy up the rooms in the hotel. I will kick out those who don't want to leave. Tebet said calmly. Yes, sir. The knight who came in first responded immediately, then pointed at a few people in the team and said, You three, clean the first floor for me, you three, follow me to the second floor to clean up. After saying that, Cotton and the 3 of them ran down the stairs towards the second floor.